Hello and welcome. My name is Ethan, aka True Carnivore.
And I am Travis, aka TC Breakdown.
And today we are going to be talking about good gateway animes, what makes one, and we're going to give you a list towards the end of a bunch of them that we think are good. So, Travis, kick it off.
Alright, well, first of all, a big thing that can make a good gateway anime for someone that's trying to get into anime is nostalgia. If you saw a show as a kid, oftentimes when you can jump back into that show and it'll be really engaging for you because it'll bring back that nostalgia. And after that, you can really jump into deeper shows. For instance, I started out with Yu Hakusho. It's a great show. I saw it as a kid. So when I stumbled upon it when I first started watching anime, it was it was a lot better than just watching, plain Jane show. A good example of this I know that many people saw as a kid was DBZ. This can be a really good gateway anime, especially if you saw it as a kid, because it'll be a lot more engaging for you if you saw it as a kid.
Yeah, I agree, because I watched it as when I was younger, and I go back and watch it, and I still enjoy it, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it was like, it really was my nostalgia there. I love that show.
hmm the second thing is probably, you should probably start off with dubbed rather than subbed because it'll be a turn off to start with subtitles. And DBZ has a fine dub, so for instance, you're starting with that, you'll probably be way more engaged if you watch it dubbed rather than subbed. Unless you watch a lot of like foreign films with subtitles already, you're not going to want to watch something with subtitles.
And that honestly takes a lot of getting used to with the sub. It's not for everyone. We did a pretty good podcast over dub versus sub, but I think it would be smart to start with dubbed, and then if you decide to, if say you're getting into a show and you're up to like, whatever the higher episodes and they haven't been dubbed yet, they're not gonna dub them, then you will want to watch them subbed, and that'll take some time to get used to. And the more you get used to it, the more you'll watch it. But to start off your first anime, I'd highly recommend going dubbed.
I think most people probably started with dubbed anyway. I mean, they're more common.
Yep.
And the type of show makes a big difference too. Now, the popularity can play into this too, because if you're watching, a show that nobody's ever heard of, and you're trying to start with it, it's gonna be a little awkward because you're not gonna be able to talk about it with anyone. You're not gonna know what's good, what's bad. You're not gonna be able to ask any questions about it. So if you're watching a nice popular show like DBZ, or I'd say anything aside from the shonen animes, because they kind of take some getting used to. So like Death Note or Code Geass, you can find people who've also watched them because they're common, and you can ask questions. It'll be a lot more. It can be really engaging. You can ask questions about the show, ask questions about the culture that's represented in the show, and if everyone has seen it, it'll give you way more to talk about.
Oh yeah, and it kind of gives you a common interest with friends, and it's good conversations to have with people if you've watched the same anime together. Whereas if you both watched a bunch of more, I'd say, less popular, more rare, if you will, animes that are still as enjoyable, but not as popular for some reason.
Yeah, they're just off the beaten trail. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have as much publicity.
Right.
But all in all, the biggest factor that plays into what makes a good gateway anime for you is age group. Depending on your age, you're gonna like different stuff. You're gonna be able to pick up on deeper meanings of things, more of the emotions conveyed, and even more of the jokes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's some deep comedy in some of them, and there's also some pretty sinister comedy in some of them.
Yeah, definitely. So it all comes down to, I'm not saying that these age groups don't bleed into each other or that it's a rigid structure, but this is just like a
It's a good
kind of just
guideline.
the general guideline. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I broke this down into originally three groups, then I broke it into five. The first group that I did was 13 and under, because these are the younger, and I think that these types of animes for the younger group should be more linear, meaning it's kind of always happy ending, if you will, or if there is sad stuff, it's not so bad that you're just done. So for the 13 and under, I got 3 gateway animes that I could think of. The first one was the Avatar: The Last Airbender, because it's really popular with the kids these days. Another one, Naruto, because once again, it's really popular. And I know you can find other friends of the 13 and under age group to talk to that about.
And just to be clear, we're not talking about Shippuden here. We're talking about the first one.
Yeah, the
Before
original
it gets all
Naruto.
graphic and gory.
Yeah. And then I watched some of this when I was young. The original Pokemon. I think they're still doing it. I don't know.
I'm not sure, but the original is definitely a good starter. You know, everybody's probably watched it as a kid, so
Yeah, I
it's
think.
easy. It's easy to find.
Plus, there's also the games that go alongside it, and that's always fun.
hmm
Okay, the next age group that I did was 14 to 17, and I could think of quite a few, but not enough of them that were appropriate. So the top 2 that I came up with were One Piece, which Travis is a huge fan of that,
I am, and
and
I am 18 years of age, so that kind of shows a good example of how they bleed into one another.
yeah, I think it can also go a lot more mature, but that age group was kind of already full. So then I did another one which I've started watching and I need to get back into because it's actually pretty interesting, and I'm 22. This is Fairy Tail. I really enjoyed it. I won't lie.
hmm
It was good. So now I'm going to bleed my categories in together with these 2 categories, and I'm going to say 17 and under good starters would be the first one, Full Metal Alchemist, and this is just the original Full Metal Alchemist. It's a great series. Great series. I highly recommend that be the starter for anybody. I didn't really get into genders, but I think this one's leaning towards more of the female audience. Would be Sailor Moon, but I mean I know a lot of guys who really enjoyed it, so I can't say that it's one way or the other.
hmm
Another one is Inuyasha, because that one was really popular when I was younger, and I think it still is really popular. And one that I haven't seen, but I've heard is good, and I know I've heard people say it's a good way to start, is Fruitbasket. And it would apply to this category.
Yep.
Moving on into the more mature, this is the 18 and up. This is for older people, you know, my age group really, or older. If you're wanting to
this
get...
is a
Go ahead.
well, this is a really tough age group because a lot of animes can be adult, but they're not good gateways for a few reasons, and that's the mind fuckery that's presented to you at most of the endings of these shows, where it's really depressing or sad, or it just makes you you're like, what the fuck? And it's gonna be a turn off if you're not, accustomed to kind of how these shows are used to ending. And also it's a lot different than a movie. You have a lot more supernatural stuff, and you have a lot more Japanese culture mixed in, and
Mm-hmm.
it's apparent with these shows.
Yeah, and another problem is a lot of them are rated for these older because of nudity or gore, which are also big turnoffs if you're not really used to it. And I hate to say it, but you kind of get a little more censored towards that type of stuff, and it's a little more acceptable later on. But it's also still a big turnoff for me if they overdo either one of those. But as for 18 and up, these are good ones to start with because they're really nice animes. Cowboy Bebop. That one's probably going to be more like a nostalgia thing. I'm not sure, but I know
And
people.
that's a pretty popular one too.
Oh yeah. And this next one is one that's very near and dear to my heart because I love it. It's Rurouni Kenshin, and I
hmm
highly recommend that one. Also, Yu Hakusho, which could probably go from 14 and up, but it's a really good one. And Death Note also
hmm
could probably fit into the 14 and up, but it's a...
Death Note is really the reason Death Note is in 18 and up is because it presents you with a lot of moral dilemmas, more or less, that a younger age group might not be able to grasp quite yet.
Yeah,
And it's really deep in that way, and that's why it's in that 18 and up category.
I got you. Okay, and then bleeding these last 2 together, the 14 and up category. This one it's definitely my top 5 favorite animes of all time. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I'd highly, highly, highly recommend it for anybody starting into the anime. It's just, it's perfect.
It's perfect, he says.
And then this one's we talked about earlier, Dragon Ball Z. I think it's also a good starter, but the reason I love it so much is because I watched it when I was younger, and it still has a lot of meaning to me.
Hmm.
One that's pretty far off the beaten path, but I think people will love it, is Desert Punk.
Yes, and I loved Desert Punk when I was semi-new to anime, and it's a good gateway anime because it has a lot of comedy,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't throw too much at you at a time. It's kind of linear, and the ending will kind of, it's mixed. The ending is both good and bad.
And what happened with Desert Punk's ending is what happens with a lot of other endings. Is you can tell they were kind of trying to plan for another season, but they didn't get the funding for it.
Or you can look at it that way, or I'm not
I
sure.
don't want to give anything away, but I'm just saying it's a pretty good ending.
Yeah,
Um,
you can tell a lot of animes will leave you with an open-ended. They'll just leave it open-ended, so you kind of fill it in yourself, and it makes it look like they were trying to plan for another season, which is sometimes the case and often not.
yeah, I got you. And then
Yeah.
the final one I got is Bleach, because this one, I watched a few episodes of it. I wasn't the biggest fan, but this one kind of ties into the popularity thing because there are tons and tons and tons of fans of it, and there are tons and tons of episodes of it. So you'll have hours of conversations with people over it.
Yeah. It's one of the other shonen ones, and it's a pretty good one, I'd say. I like Bleach.
Yeah, that one, it's just all about personal preference, but um, this is a pretty decent sized list of gateway animes to get you started, and don't think that the age groups are, this is where they have to be. I was just trying to break it up to make it a little bit more easy on the people coming into it as to what they should kind of expect and where
Yeah,
they might fall into.
definitely. And the last thing is that if you take one off this list, or you take one, of a friend's recommendation, and you start watching it and you don't like it, you don't have to, finish it. You can pick a different anime, and that's probably don't be turned off, and don't watch one anime and say, "Oh, I didn't like this one. They're all going to be
Yeah,
bad."
exactly. The no animes are like the same. Honestly, you could sit down and watch, five different animes and they wouldn't have any damn thing in common. I swear, which is one thing I love about it because you really don't know what you're getting into.
Yeah,
It's one of the things that's draws me into the anime. It's good. It's good
it's
stuff.
good. It's good. Yeah, it's great.
Which so this is our gateway. We might do another thing over more hardcore animes, but
Yeah,
this is where you
we're
should start.
hmm definitely.
Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. What do you think?
I think that pretty much sums it up. We'll put a list of these shows that we talked about in the description. So if you want to, pull it up and Google it and watch it, you can have at it.
Yep. Well, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.
See ya.